Hello, welcome to another World of UX podcast. This is Dr. Darren Hood. Thanks for joining us on today. A special welcome to everybody joining us for the first time. We got a special session on today as we're going to take a little bit of a break from the Harsh Realities of UX Maturity series. It'll be the first time my schedule finally freed up and I can start having guests on again. And man, what a great way to start this off with some of the folks from an organization that has been near and dear to my heart for a great volume of my time in the UX career, folks from Human Factors International today. Today, I've got with me, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves more thoroughly here in a moment, but I will kick this off by letting you know who's going to be here, and then we'll hand it over to them to get us started with some intros. So to start us, we have the one, the only Dr. Eric Schaffer from HFI. Welcome today, Dr. Schaffer. Dr. Eric, can you give us a quick intro today for those who might not be familiar with HFI and with you?
Thanks, Darren. Well, I've been doing UX work since 1977, so I'm starting to understand a little bit about it. I founded Human Factors International. We date back to 1981 and been rolling with that ever since. We're known for dealing with very complicated systems, but we're also very much known for setting up large-scale UX operations. So wrote the book Institutionalization of UX.
Yes.
If you have trouble sleeping at night, it's still available. And we've learned a lot even since that in terms of how you set up a practice in a practical way.
That is phenomenal. And I love the book. I'm glad you get a shout out for the book. I use that when I used to manage UX maturity at Bosch. That was my go-to book to help me to get that job done there. So yes, thank you. Thank you for that. And the other guest that we have today, Tapan Parikh. Did I pronounce that correctly? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Tapan, glad to have you on today. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah. Well, thanks first of all for having us on. Really excited to have this conversation. So I haven't worked in UX quite as long as Eric, but I will say that Eric and HFI and Apala and their team are the ones that originally got me into UX. Mm-hmm. And this is now, almost 25 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey, and I've learned a lot. So yeah, I'm working very closely with HFI on essentially, thinking about where AI is going to play a role mm-hmm. in UX, both in terms of practice of UX as well as the content of it, what kinds of interfaces we're going to make. But I'm also a professor at Cornell, and I've taught HCI and UX, both at Berkeley and Cornell, for about 20 years now. And
wow,
so I've
nice.
seen a lot of it from the academic side, teaching, doing research. On the research side, I've worked on things like UX across the world, especially looking at rural areas and people who are traditionally not considered part of the traditional UX research target audience. And I've done a lot of work with kids and in schools and lots of different places that one might not think that UX plays a role, but in fact it does. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Absolutely. And thanks for both of you for taking the time to be with me on today. Second time I've had somebody from HFI on the show. And even just hearing Tapan talk about that, I'm like, I've got ideas for some future stuff. There's some other things, man, what a footprint. I always love hearing about somebody's story in the discipline as well as what they're actually touching, what they're actually doing. And I think that what you said is just further information, further proof, further data for those of us who think in the circles, who think that UX is just UI. It's about far more than that. And so I love that. So thank you again for taking the time to join me on today. And we've got 3 topics, folks, that we are going to cover on today. And we're going to go ahead and without further ado, we're going to jump right into topic number 1, which is future of the interface. And either one of you wants to kick it off. I'll let you folks decide how you're going to tandem with that. And I'll probably have a couple of very small notes at the end. But for those of you who don't like hearing me talk, somebody actually told me that.
That's
let
what
the
it mean.
guests. Yeah, no.
Good
I know
grief.
they are.
Yep.
But today is one of those days where I just want to hear the guests. So I'll have very little to say at the very end of each point. But I'm just right now, I'm fanboying out. So I'm just going to sit here and enjoy. So go ahead and take it away on the topic of future of the interface. Who's going to kick us off?
Tapan, go ahead.
Sure. The future of the interface. So, in the world of UI, HCI, there's been this long debate between, AI mediated approaches to user interaction, agents, voice, speech, versus the graphical user interface, windows and mouses and icons and so on. So this has been a debate in the field for, 30 years now. And the graphical user interface has always been really resilient. A lot of our interaction, whether it be with computers or with mobile devices, is still by pointing or clicking or touching, And so a lot of using of the visual system, a lot of, physical interaction. And so, we really haven't transitioned to having the primary way we interact with computers be talking to them as much as the hype and the ambition has been there. What I think now, with LLMs obviously are the big thing, right? Language models. And, we're spending a lot of time now talking to them, either to getting help with coding or getting advice about life or asking questions, like even my dad, I was talking to my mom yesterday, and my dad, she was like, your dad's new best friend is Gemini. He doesn't even talk to me anymore. He just talks to Gemini all day. So I don't know, are we seeing finally this shift, this transition from pointing and clicking to talking, and I know Eric has opinions on this too, so I'm looking forward to hear from him. But I do think we're seeing that transition, so much of our interaction now with computers, with devices, is conversational. We're having a lot more conversational interactions and talking with and talking through computers or with phones is occupying so much of our time now and so much of our attention. So I do think we're seeing this shift and this transition. But I'm excited to see what Eric thinks about this. I know he's got ideas and thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, it's a little scary. It reminds me of the days when Google first came out, and I was told you're going to be out of business because everything will be a Google search, and that didn't turn out to be true. I've actually been also told that I'd be out of business because they were getting color in the interface, and color screens were user friendly, and so we made a bomb of fixing color. So the thing is that I kind of disagree, Tapan, that it's GUIs that are resilient. It is human information processing that's resilient. So that's the thing that tends to persist. So if you do the math on that, there is a role for a conversational interface. There's a role for me to give an instruction. There's a role for me to have a dialogue. Certainly and that will be there. But what we've seen, and we've seen this with many, many clients, many studies we've done, people would rather click a button than formulate a query, think about, right? So remember that short-term memory recognition is much easier than pure recall.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the fundamental thing, that I would rather walk in the room and click a button and have the light go on than remember what the query is. And that's even more correct when I'm trying to do advanced things. So maybe I'm trying to decide what film I'm going to watch, and being able to see the film and then just click. Even just the typing activity. So you have the cognitive activity, the motor involvement. If I have to type it, or even if I have to speak it, it takes more effort than just going click. So the thing that I believe is resilient is is the human information processing part of it.
Interesting. I know you say, recognition is a lot faster and a lot less cognitively taxing than recall.
Pure recall.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do think that dynamic is changing a little bit, because, in terms of user interfaces as well as like spoken interaction systems, we think about intent, right? What's the user's intent? And, in UI, we try to think about how we could best support it through the interface. I know you think about that a lot. In spoken, conversational systems, we try to find out, through a set of, natural language processing techniques, what is the user's intent? What are they trying to do? So in the pre-LLM days, we had a relatively, we would do, the what's called NLUs, natural language understanding systems, and they could only detect a few words that you were going to say. They had this kind of trained library where it looked for specific words, and based on those words, it tried to figure out what you were going to do. And so you really had to remember what were the right words. If you forgot what the right words were, or if you used a different set of words, the system would be lost. It'd have no idea where you were going or what you were trying to do. And, it'd be stuck in IVR or whatever. But now you don't have to remember the words. You can say whatever you want, and the system, the LM will figure it out. So, the idea of recall, I don't know, we have to, I think, rethink it, because you really don't have to remember exactly how to say something or what to say. You can really say whatever you want, and it's up to the system to figure out your intent. And so I don't know, maybe there's a shift of labor here, the shift of labor from me clicking, me deciding what I want, me deciding what I want to do, to just ranting and letting the computer figure out what I'm trying to do and let it guide me and assist me through that process. So maybe that calculation between recognition and recall has changed now, just because of the breadth of understanding and the breadth of interpretation that LLMs can do now.
Yeah, I remember the days where they were natural sounding interfaces,
Right.
and you needed to learn all the words. Yeah. That's no longer true. I get that. Okay. But when I think about supporting a given task or a given business activity or something like that, a call center, whatever it might be, when the UX professional designs that interface, what they're doing is they're taking a mental model that hopefully is natural to the environment, but that mental model, and they're placing it in the interface so that I sit down in front of it and I go, oh, I get this. I get what this job is about. That's very different than, type a prompt. And right. So think about it. When I design that, I'm looking at it and it is partitioned in a way, it's structured in a way where it guides me. So when the UX enterprise, right, we have a fight over this. HFI has a tool, UX Enterprise, that basically models what you need to know about an environment in the UX space. It's built just for UX people to use. And when you sit in front of it, it reminds even me of what to think about with the user. So I would forget about, okay, I've got Hofstede and Hall and Trumperners but I wouldn't remember all the things inside of it, and I might forget social narratives. So the interface is actually carrying a lot of the structure of the thing. Now, I totally agree. There's another kind of task where that dialogue is better, but that's just like, if you said you're going to take away Google search, I would strangle you. But I only use Google search, 5% of the time. Maybe I'll only use conversational interfaces 15% of the time, unless I need psychotherapy.
So I think this is the first time we've had this conversation a few times, and this might be the first time I've heard you say, and you probably believe this, but this may be the first time I've heard you say that dialogue is better for certain things. So I'm going to count that as
it's
I'm going to count
absolute.
that as a micro win conversation. But getting back to this point, right? Yeah. So I totally understand UX enterprise, it's about understanding and visualization of, a complicated information space. And I completely agree. For those kinds of, tasks, information visualization, understanding, knowledge management, that visual interfaces will never go away. Our bandwidth, our capacity to understand complex information just is a lot more efficient visually than it is through text or through voice.
Hey, am I hearing you say that for the first time?
Fair enough. Touche. But getting back to this point of structure, and I just don't think we've thought as rigorously about what the structure of a conversation should look like versus the structure of what a user interface should look like. This ability to design conversations has always been like this kind of cottage industry and has never had the kind of institutionalization and methodological innovation that visual UIs have had. Mm-hmm. So I think, that's a real opportunity to think about the structure of conversations, think about the building block components. Let me just finish.
Okay.
So, this is something I'm really interested in. So I'm teaching a new class at Cornell starting in January that's going to be called Conversation Engineering. So, which is about designing interfaces, conversational interfaces in a systematic way methodologically, technically, from a design interaction perspective. So maybe it's just a question of bringing rigor to that process, bringing structure to the process the same way we've done for graphical interfaces.
So that maybe there can be a structure, but think about something for a minute. We've been working on doing interviews with an AI driving the interview, right? The UX4.ai, that platform that we've been working on together. So I always say that anyone can do an interview, but it takes a lifetime to get good at it. So Tapan, you've been pumping the way that I do interviews, the way that Paula does interviews, and building it in. So that's an example where you are structuring an interface that gets very different results because of the way that dialogue is structured to probe and to go through doing that basically Gestalt interview.
And excellent example of conversation engineering, right? I think,
right.
Qualitative interviews are one of the best and most, rigorous examples of conversations that we have, conversations with a structure, with an intent, like theoretical, a foundation behind them. So think about that for all different kinds of conversations. What if we had the same level of rigor, theoretical depth, methodology, structure for all kinds of conversations, just not these kind, not only these kinds of interviews.
That is interesting hearing you folks go back and forth about that. I'll throw my little 3 cents in here. I mentioned in our sort of kind of a pre-read and sending some of my thoughts about the topics back. And I mentioned something I constantly say, and hearing both of you make me think about this again, where there is an interface noun, there's always an interface verb. So even when the traditional interface goes away, there's still going to be an interface. The question is, how will people interface verb with the solution, which contains the interface? So I think there will always be an interface, which leads me to my second point. One thing I love about UX and helped me fall in love with UX, and there was a book, I can't remember the name of the book or the author, but the thing that I remember was that it talked about how pervasive true UX is, that there's always this melding, so to speak, or a landscape of how you're going to engage, what the mental models are. And I was working at an agency when the iPhone came out. We had to find out what to do really, really fast. Because now we've got to design for these experiences. And what is this mobile thing? How in the world are we going to do this? And that's when I learned how pervasive UX is. And you take these principles that you applied to, at the time, the websites. And then I was working on interactive TV was big at the time. And so I would transition how I designed for those experiences on the desktop. I would do the same thing on the interactive TV and say, you know what? We got to do the same thing for these mobile phones. And so we learned, we got into the rigor we got into the weeds. We looked at the heuristic factors, which are going to transition and be pervasive as well. And so that's what I'm hearing across what both of you are saying. There's still this pervasiveness, and if we keep our eye on that, if we focus on it, we're going to achieve what we're trying to achieve for ourselves and for the users and for the business alike. And then my third point that I thought about was, and maybe this is a question, because I think I heard you say this, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. But there is an evolution of patterns. We have patterns for the physical, where we're clicking and doing things of that nature. But I think that the more people engage and the more people build their acumen on engaging from a conversational standpoint, patterns are going to start to emerge. Just like they did on the other side. So here we've got the pervasiveness. Again, any thoughts on the evolution of patterns before we pivot to topic 2?
I mean, I would think about it as population stereotypes. And so I remember when people looked at a mouse and put it on the floor because it looked like a sewing machine and you would step on it. And now nobody does that anymore, right? So the shift is in those population stereotypes, how I expect things to work. Mm-hmm. And that will happen. At the same time, there's a fundamental core of human information processing, visual, intellectual, memory, motor activity. It's all very quirky. It doesn't work the way you'd think. And knowing that and applying that, whatever the technology, from my early days where there were no CRT screens yet, and you were doing like paper printouts and cards, all the way till now where, AI is coming on and the conversational interface is there. But I think AI fits in even more behind the scenes, and AI sits behind the GUI and makes it work better.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Totally agree.
So there's this old conception in computer science and AI of language machines. AI is a language machine, a machine that's good at understanding and generating language. And what's a better language machine than humans? Humans have fundamentally evolved because of and through language, right? And so I think that's also a core aspect of how we understand and how we communicate and how we get along in groups. So I think some of that will naturally transition.
Excellent. All right, on to topic number 2. And this is, I think, going to be the big topic of the 3, synthetic users in research. Who's going to kick it off and take it away?
I'll let Eric go
Tapan,
first.
No, Tapan, you're super deep in it. Man, you're the guy.
Sure, I'll go ahead. I think one trait that professors and politicians share is always to drive conversations to things they know about and want to talk about, right? And so we're there now. Synthetic users is something that I know about and want to talk about. So Eric mentioned we're working on this platform called UX4, UX4.ai, which is a platform for accelerating user research, right? And so he mentioned one component. We have this AI-driven interviewer based on, Eric and Apala and HFI's, interviewing techniques that are based on years and years of experience that can go out and conduct interviews with humans using voice or using text messaging or WhatsApp. So that's one component of the system. But another component of the system is something we call, generative user profiles, right? So they're not synthetic users. We call them generative user profiles because that's what they are. We take user profile, which is a more robust and rigorous approach to what we often call personas in the industry and the practice. But, again, based on HFI's methodology, user profiles are much more robust in that they describe a range of people through their cognitive, psychological, interactional characteristics. And what we do with generative user profiles is to make those generative, where they can generate, again, language or ideas or behaviors. And so, these are just the way we have generative agents, generative AI. We have now generative user profiles that are not just static, not just, like a poster in your office, but actually things that you can talk to and talk back to. Now, what are these good for? I think that's the question we're interested in. So we've used them across a number of projects with lots of different clients. I'll let Eric tell you which of those he's willing to share or able to share. But all kinds of industries, all kinds of sizes of company. So, there's a couple of areas where synthetic users are really, really useful. So one of our, customers, clients works with a demographic that would be impossible to get in the room to do a real interview with. They've tried years and years and they really can't get a single person into the room. So in those kinds of cases, it's better than nothing, right? It's really better than nothing. And not only because of the information you'll get from the generative user profiles, but also because it helps bring user centricity into an environment that it typically doesn't reach just because of the lack of user voice in those kinds of contexts. So if nothing else, it's a cultural shift. It's a shift in culture within the organization where instead of engineers or business people driving decisions, you at least have a proxy for a person, even if it's not a person themselves. And at the very least, it gets past some of these tunnel vision, ego-driven design decisions that often come from non-UX people, not to be so critical here. And so I think that's one really important area where I do think generative user profiles or synthetic users can make a difference in organizations and culture and, this idea of institutionalizing UX.
So that one was a chief counsel of large corporations, legal department.
Yeah.
Head of a legal department, you're not going to get them.
Right. Amazing. Amazing.
So one thing that I've thought about a lot is what is the difference between these generative user profiles and just asking? And I've got one you haven't seen yet. So we're working for a motorcycle company. And I went in and we've got a bunch of generative user profiles for them. And so I asked, what's important in buying a bike? Because what we're trying to do is get for this entire huge company, what is their North Star? What is their differentiated, unique position? This, for me, is the number one strategic thing you do in UX. So let me just read you, put it into ChatGPT. What did it say? Reliability, low hassle ownership, fuel efficiency and running cost, power and capability for real world tasks, trust in brand and local support, style and personal identity, secondary but rising. That's ChatGPT. Now listen to what UX4 AI GUPS says, and you'll see it's different and, in my opinion, much stronger to design around. Identity and self-expression, status and social recognition, independence and control, progress and life achievement, excitement and emotional reward. Very different. Now we went in and we created a number of alternative North Stars, the unique positioning. And just to give you a sense, I've got several of them. It's like, and this is just a sample. No, that pitch is dead on arrival for me. I want something future facing. Not particularly. It sounds a bit mass market and bland. I want one that feels distinctly mine and not really. That sounds too generic and duty first. I'd rather have, right? The one that we are recommending, all the user profiles said good. And it said, very important. In my case, a two-wheeler it's very important. I want, right? It said, so there's one I can't tell because I can read Hindi, but I can't read I'm Malayalam or something. But anyway, what we're doing here is using these generative user profiles, the GUPS, to leap ahead. Now, we're recommending more research because this decision is a hundreds of $1 million decision. But we're able to eliminate a bunch of stuff that clearly doesn't work. And we're able to validate that we've got some stuff that looks pretty good. And we know how to go on and do some human research to supplement that. But the funny thing is, when you look at what you get by having the interviewer interview people versus interviewing the gups, you can have the AI interview the AI. Okay, that's just really weird. But when the AI interviews the AI, you get 67% of the same issues with just the automated analysis. When you put a human into the analysis, we were getting 92% of the issues show up. That's not 100%. But when you look at the cost-benefit analysis, it's pretty good.
That is amazing. That's amazing. Best use cases I've heard on this subject. I have not dived into the subject of synthetic users very much so far, and I just see things in passing on LinkedIn mostly, and everything sounded so amateurish to me. So I'm like, okay, is this another one of these hype trains? And then I backed up. And the opportunity to use synthetic users never came up in my job, so there was never any reason for me to dive into it. But hearing what you're saying now, I think this is a very informed set of input that both of you are sharing. And I think that it's really, really critical. And some of the notes that I jotted down here to bounce off of you is, man, one of the things that stood out, $100 million decision. I mean, a lot of people do not understand the importance of what we do.
So
they just don't.
Yeah. So the North Star is the linchpin of the whole organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to present to these guys next week in Bangalore, and it's a huge problem because they've got motorcycles from translating $400 to $20,000 from very utilitarian, right? All these different markets.
Yeah.
But I told them, and they agree, they need something that pulls it all together. And just for fun, I took something we did for one of the big machine companies, right? They had heavy earth moving. And they had the idea that they would be the company you trusted. And that would pull everything together for them. This is not right. And we came up with something different, and I picked it because it's not right, because then I can show it. But I showed then what you would do different in designing a machine, that you have an operator or machine, so that you felt like you trusted it. And there's a whole blizzard of things you do different, from the feel of it and the sound of it, making it go thunk when it closes, right? That sort of thing, to making it never fake you out, never trick you, to make it never fail when there's glare, all those things. Mm-hmm. So when you get that North Star right, everything in the UX space coalesces around getting that done.
Yes, very nice.
I wanted to just pick up on one of the points that Eric said. So, one thing that I've really learned a lot from working with HFI is understanding the customer side of the business, the demand side, and I think in academic UX, HCI, we're really bad at understanding the demand side of UX. And that's really ironic, right? We're UX people, but we don't think about the users of UX. We spend so little time thinking about, how does this play out in business context, organizational context? And with synthetic users from the demand side, Eric and I have had literally dozens of conversations with potential customers and clients over the last year and a half. And okay, some of them may want to do AI moderated interviews, some of them are interested in that, but literally everyone we've talked to has been interested in synthetic users, or generative user profiles, as we call them. And because they know it's such a pain in the butt to do real research with real humans. And it takes so long and it costs so much money that from the demand side, if we're trying to understand, the users of UX, this is a very compelling idea. And, we would be stupid to ignore, how with the potential there as well as the excitement around it.
Yes. And part of the, my second note involved, and I have a t-shirt, I do these little t-shirts with little slogans that I come up in my talks. And one of them, I designed a t-shirt that says garbage in, garbage out with the A and the I in bold and a little larger. Because that's basically it. I mean, you've convinced me that synthetic users, just in this short time, you've convinced me that using synthetic users is indeed viable. The question is
generative user profiles, Darren. We also want you to start calling them generative
so
user
there's
profiles.
There's something it's worth taking a second to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get a synthetic user, most of the time what they're doing is they're dumping a bunch of stuff into a large language model.
Yeah.
Facts and stuff like that. What we're doing is we're taking knowledge about a given user population and putting it into a framework where it goes, okay, they're cultural issues. Okay, Hofstede, Trumpeners, Hall, are they individualistic? Are they right? All those kinds of things. We put it into Maslow, and Max Neef is better than Maslow. So we put it into that. And so it's working off of the core psychology. So it isn't dump it into the large language model. It's put it into, so you're paying attention. So when I go into an environment as a consultant, right, I get paid a lot of money to do the same thing other people do. I go in, I listen to people, I look at stuff, but I have a lens, a filter even, that says, this is my model of human beings. I understand visual, intellectual, memory, motor activity. I understand persuasion engineering, all of that. And so looking at things with that context is very, very powerful, and I get paid a bomb for it. The GUPS does the same thing. The GUPS looks at things with an underlying model and then answers from that model.
Yes.
And it's really cool. In the tool, you can see there's a panel with the underlying models and then the dialogue. And then, it's pretty cool.
I think that addresses the garbage in, garbage out problem. That we have so many people in UX, you folk may have heard me mention this in the wild so many times, that I said that UX started becoming under siege starting in 2011. Then you fast forward a few years and I talk about the microwave mindset, how so many people started having this, where they wanted to get somewhere too fast in the discipline and they ignored the rigor. And then they want to go from 0 to 60 without doing the work, without having an understanding. And now I think what you're saying about these frameworks is the term synthetic users possibly goes away. Because I think in a discipline where nomenclature is critical to what we do, for some reason, a lot of people don't pay attention to nomenclature and the associated taxonomies of our own work. It's the way you described it, that gets rid of the garbage.
Right. So, and this is not something that's just AI. So I always say personas are for amateurs. Personas are for amateurs because they're good for telling an executive why people won't understand this. But if you're a professional, a persona, it doesn't even give you distributions of stuff. You don't know, is it 90% women or 51% women? It's a woman. Oh, good. Right. The other thing, though, is we have a history of crap personas. And it's funny, the other day I was... So I always say that the funniest example is they always put in, there's Jane has a cat. And I keep wondering why that matters. Right?
Yeah.
And I was talking with a client and they said, we have personas. And I looked at it. It was like, there's Philip Philip has 3 cats. Oh, good. That's what I need.
Yeah, you remind me of something I did, because I think that I did something similar to what you folks are doing with your framework. I love Tamara Allen's. I just went to her show recently. I loved the work that she did with personas back in the mid 2000s. And I sort of built on that. And when I was at Bosch in particular, I was brought in to help build their UX practice initially. And when I came in, same thing. What's current state? How are we doing things? What's going on? Oh, we've got this one persona. Oh, what? One persona trying to prescribe, how do we roll out this new solution across the organization with all the domiciles to manage all of the logistics work. And we're going to base a huge, this was a $2 to $3 million decision minimally. And it revolves around, and it's sitting on top of a foundation of one persona. And that persona was a manager, not really somebody who was doing the day-to-day. So I went in, and they had destroyed all the relationships. Every time they saw leadership coming with another solution, they freaked out because they just pushed the solution on them. So I said, no. We need to rebuild the relationships. We need to reestablish the trust between the people who are doing the work and the people in leadership. We need to drive an understanding of what is day-to-day operation, what is key. And we would meet every day and do our stand-ups as we were working in an agile environment. And I went in, I took that one persona, I met the person that persona was based out of, but I also went into 3 different domiciles. I broadened, I did the same thing. One persona is not going to do anything. We need to understand what are the different types of people that are using the solution, types of people doing the work. We need to understand a range of people within each type. And so we went from one persona, and I ended up with a wall of about 15 to 20 personas. And it gave us a broader picture and understood who we were building this thing for. And then we could approach it. This is what problem are we trying to address? Well, this affects this person and this person and this person across these different ways. And even the categories of things, there wasn't a so-and-so has a cat. It was, what is the technological expertise of this person? What are the key things?
How much math do they know? All that, right?
Yeah, we got into the weeds. And so I built this big framework, and it used to be on the wall in the company, and it was rolled out. So
part of the structure of UX Enterprise is built to handle. So I've had banks we've worked with for 8 years at a time and stuff, and they'll have 50, 60 different user profiles. Mm-hmm. Because you have employees and you have customers and you have high net worth customers and it's really, it's a question how fragmented you get. It's the same as market segments though. Mm-hmm. And so that there's a whole thing we could do about that. That'd be boring.
But I love that though. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm team synthetic users, but it's gotta be, but I do speak from an absolute point. For the listeners out there, I know these two guys get it, but for those of you who are listening, I'm always speaking in absolutes. So when I say synthetic users, I'm talking about done right. Asterisk, and the asterisk and the footnote in the bottom of the page says done right. If you go through the motions and just dump things into an LLM, that's the microwavable mindset. That's lazy. UX is not a place for lazy people. And I hear people saying sometimes, I'm lazy. No, there's a difference between working smarter and working harder. And if you're driving value, that's what this is all about. And it's really sad to see people always trying to go from 0 to 60 and missing too many things along the way. Your output's going to suffer because of that. Your reputation is going to suffer. The UX maturity is going to suffer. People buying into what you do, deciding what and who to cut when the time comes for cuts because of what you have done, because of your track record. If we rigor, I love rigor. I've always loved rigor. As a 3-year-old child, according to the story, that I loved rigor and paid attention to detail and then get into the weeds and understanding complexity developing simplicity is based on understanding complexity. And then now you know where to move, you know where to go, because you understand all the different things. And you're going to be, as we were talking about in our pre-read kind of conversation, that there is anal, there's being anal for the purpose of bringing forth value, and then there's being anal retentive, and that's being detail-oriented about something that does nothing for anybody. And if more UXers do things like that, I think we'd all be better off for it. So that's my take. I'm still trying to stay off my soapbox, keep it in the closet. I had some other notes here. I'm not going to touch on those because I know we're running out of time. Let's dive into topic number 3. And topic number 3 has to do with the forecasting of UX operation. What do you see UXers doing as we move forward from 2026 forward? What are your thoughts, guys, on this?
All right, that one's my turn. So we don't know. It's funny. Apollo came over just 2 hours ago and said, "Oh, we've got this client," and they said that they could take the research we've done and just drop it in, and the AI will do all the design, and our UX staff are just going to look and make sure it's not bad. And then our UX staff are going, I had to redo my whole presentation because the AI. So I can give you what I think it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think that AI will make us much more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll be able to speed the research phase, handle knowledge management better. I think it'll do a lot of the detailed design work and draft, at least. I think we had a case just recently. We were delivering, and Tapan was on this very much. We were delivering an audio-visual control system for a university. And we designed it and delivered the whole thing coded, which I think is an important trend.
Mm-hmm.
But the graphics wasn't a commercial system where it was totally critical. And it took about 20 minutes with an AI, and the graphics were fine. It was good enough. We had a couple of different graphics, a light one, dark one, we're fine. So I think a lot of help will happen there. But I believe that the whole thing will still be run by a UX professional,
mm-hmm.
certainly ones that are very strong, who can look at things like, what is the UX North Star? What is the omnichannel solution? Those kind of strategic things, getting that aligned. We have to do that. Looking at the research and not just looking for hallucinations, but sense making from it,
mm-hmm.
knowing what to do with it, and communicating it, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Very important. In design, I think we're still going to have to do that structural design where I understand the user's deep mental model and the scenarios, and I build the container to fit that. I haven't seen an AI do that well yet. But when it comes to the detail, certainly when it's content, we did one project for a business banking environment and drafted 220 pages of business banking interface in 8 days. And when we were done, the business bankers looked at it and they complained about the images. They wanted like different faces and stuff on it. And no issues with the content. So that's going to be there and great. It'll help us to do testing, but we'll still have to interpret it and figure out what to do. So there's definitely this strong strategic path. Now, the thing that scares anyone about that is that how do you look at an ecosystem of UX professionals where now we grow people from, you're an intern and we grow them up until they're 15 years later, really, really strong. what are we going to do with that? Particularly if that middle is kind of cut out. So I think we have some educational kinds of issues around this, but our job still has to happen. And I think that our job is going to be the dominant one. So I really believe when you look at the ability to have no code systems, vibe coding, all that we'll be in a position where the big question is, what is it going to be? Not how do I wire it inside? And so there'll be less people worrying about hooking up APIs. There'll still be some, Tapan, don't worry. But the dominant position will be those figuring out what it should be.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I'm going to be a little bit ambitious here because I think our UX and our practice and our profession, this is a moment where we need to be very, very ambitious. And I think I'm going to put it out there that I think this is the biggest opportunity for UX since the invention of the personal computer or the graphical user interface. I think this is a huge opportunity for UX, as Eric just pointed out. Because as coding, as engineering becomes commodity, anyone can code now, anyone can build things now. All kinds of people and businesses and organizations are building stuff now. Companies are really going to have to differentiate and compete at the user experience level. That's going to be the core differentiating market force is that, how do these things actually work for users? Not only how do they work? And I think this example that Eric mentioned of, delivering this AV system for the university, it's a great example because, in a before AI coding, we would have just had to hand this off to their AV integrators to build our vision, right? And they were going to use this really janky back-end system that, would have put a lot of constraints on what we could do visually and interaction-wise. Instead, we ourselves were able to deliver an end-to-end working system in HTML5, and not relying on any of this janky, outdated legacy stuff. And we could get it to look and work exactly how we wanted it. The engineers, they don't need to be part of this conversation in this particular case, at least. We had complete control of the presentation layer, how it looked, how it worked. And that's a moment of tremendous opportunity for our practice. Our practice can go from someone that just understands and designs to someone that does, and I think that's a huge opportunity for us to do if we're not lazy, as you point out, if we grab that mantle, if we're ambitious. And so I think this is a crucial moment for our profession and for our industry to become more central in product, become more central in technology, become more central in companies. And I hope we do take up that mantle.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. And the two things you make me think about, I've recently completed an AI intensive at Harvard, and they said something on the same line of what you said, Dr. Eric, that the AI, a lot of people are afraid and they think it's going to push us out, but it's actually going to make the people who are more qualified put those people in a better strategic position, and more so of somebody who will coach and manage, oversee, to sort of establish the guardrails, the governance and things of that nature to make sure that things go forward. And there's a ton of efficiencies that will be accelerated that we couldn't. I mean, I did a competitive analysis just this week. I conducted a competitive analysis of 20 different companies and finished them all and had Confluence pages created for each one of them, all within 45 minutes to an hour. That's fantastic. Now we can go back, and I love how one of my peers said that AI is not perfect. It's going to make mistakes. But if you can get 70% of the way there in a fraction of the time, that's a huge plus.
I actually always say that, AI hallucinates, but my staff hallucinate also.
Yes. And that's something I heard somebody say. I actually posted that recently. He said the AI doesn't hallucinate, but the people do. Again, it's the garbage in, garbage out. It's going to produce what you give it. Give it the context. Give it the data that it needs. It thrives on static information. And if we can take that static and then make it more dynamic because of what we bring to the table, now we're getting somewhere. And that's how I try to approach it. I've gone from 0 to 60 in a sense because I used AI for personal things mostly. I'm very hype averse, and I heard so much hype about AI that I wanted nothing to do with it. What I failed to realize was that I was already using it. Because I'm big on wearables. So I've got the new Aura 5 here, and I've got my Whoop band over here. I've got an Amazfit Helio coming today, and I just abandoned a couple other things. I've got all these things. So I'm not diabetic, but I wear a CGM because I want to take charge of my metabolism. And I got into biohacking, and I lost 50 pounds just hacking my metabolism. So I learned how to eat, when to eat, what to eat, what something eat. And I can dialogue with AI with all of these devices. I'm taking all my data and it's going through a Livity and through Bevel and all these things and letting me know what to do to make things better for my life. 'Cause nobody ever taught us how to age, so I'm learning how to age and I'm passing that information down. So
Darren,
yeah.
So the thing you're raising is really another interesting thing, and we don't have time for it today. But there's a question of how we live.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe the UX professionals, we are going to have to decide how we live. And I've seen models that are horrific, where it's like you're living in a casino and offers are popping out everywhere and the bells are ringing and you're getting points. That's a nightmare, but it could be. There are others where you really look at modeling almost a Vedic enlightened kind of way of being. And so that's something that I think, talking about a big ask, I think the UX profession is going to need to think about that, think about what work is, think about what people do, and think about how people will be.
Yes. And a lot to uncover. A wonderful journey. It should be also. We got it to Tapan's point again. This is a phenomenal opportunity. And we really need to take advantage of it. And I love how you said too, Dr. Eric, in the beginning, how long you've been doing UX. It wasn't called UX way back then. I just interacted with somebody earlier today. Yeah, because 20 years, we've come a long way. 20 years?
I think I'm getting near 50. And I'm getting near 50. And I remember being called a knobs and dials psychologist. And people introduce me as, one of the founders in the field, and it pisses me off because the field started in 1940s and I'm not that old.
I love the Henry Dreyfuss stuff. I recommend that book
all
the
course.
time. Oh my God.
I did that. And it's interesting, like sewing machines, you had those little mock-up models and, you have so I have the sewing machine and we're doing the distance from the labels and this height. So it's 10, 17 minutes of archophobia, all that stuff. And then I watch people and nobody sews like that. Nobody sews standing up like right up 90-degree angles. Everybody's hunched over. And so all the numbers were wrong.
Wow. Yeah. Our discipline. I wish people would get into the history more. It would help people, I think, the logical folks would have more of a respect for what we do and where we're going and to put more into it and to avoid the microwavable mindset. Because that's just a problem we have.
The cool thing about this field is it is a lifetime of learning. It's a lifetime of getting better.
Yep.
And it's generational. So I'm standing on the shoulders of Chapanis and all those guys back then, and they're all gone. And now people are standing on my shoulders, and like both my kids have doctorates in the field. And so it just keeps rolling, and I think we can get stronger.
And that's where the one of the main battles I fight, because a lot of the people, a huge volume percentage of the people that I see today are trying to eliminate past shoulders. And that does not bode well if we ignore. I even had a show once that was dedicated to the pioneers, what I call the pioneers of the discipline. You need to learn about these people, understand the way they paved, because the people who are trying to get rid of the shoulders are trying to enter an arena where the way was made because of the work that you and people like you did. We can't do that.
And the ones before.
No discipline will achieve success ignoring the predecessors.
Yep.
So
it is that building that's going on generation after generation that makes us know what to do in the field.
Yes.
And even though we were working with paper tapes and teletype machines and Schmidt triggers and octal and all that, the models that we came up with, the methodology, so I was one of the two co-authors on the Bell System Practice 007 on UX, basically 1979. And that methodology is still kind of what we do. I mean, we're in version 7 now of the HFI framework. Still kind of the same stuff.
That's right. But it makes sense. And it speaks to the pervasiveness again of the principles.
Yep.
Again.
And I have a call coming up shortly. And we're looking at how to model long-term use of something, right? And I realized, there's something called the GOMS model. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Maybe before. Yeah, no, I thought it might be before your times. Goals, operators, right? And that model was brilliant and was never, ever used because it was so detailed and so awkward to do. And I was like, maybe AI could do it.
I love.
Maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have something to share about that later. I look forward to hearing about that.
Yeah, we'll see what we come up with. It'd be a good meeting.
But folks, this has been dynamite. I love it. I'm sure the users or the listeners will love this. This is dynamite stuff. Any closing remarks or anything you'd like to promote before we wrap up?
I think we mentioned it a couple of times. If you're interested in these kinds of topics and want to work with HFI and with UX4, please reach out. We're excited about working with people on, all of these topics, AI and UX research, AI for delivering working code as UX professionals, and thinking about the future of the user interface, innovation. We're interested in all these kinds of topics. So, excited for people to reach out if they want to follow up on any of these topics that came up.
And Darren, I want to thank you as maybe one of the people that's qualified to be a representative of the industry, because you really do push a level of rigor, a level of depth in the field. And in our field, depth is where it's at. If you just try to, this is what my intuition says, this looks good. I've learned so many times that, no. You got to do the work. You got to have the models. You've got to know all the things back to Yerkes-Dodson law in 1903. And if you don't know that, you're not going to get it right.
Wow. Wonderful.
Everybody look that up if you don't.
There's so much wonderful stuff for us to dive into as UX professionals. And then maybe on a future call, we can get into some of those things.
All right.
It's available. And I teach as well, Tapan. I didn't know if you're aware that I try to impart as much as I can about the passion for the discipline and the respect for where we've come from. And I think the more we respect where we come from, it raises the ceiling on where we can go. I firmly believe that. So thanks, folks, again for this time today. This is I'm doing backflips, but I'm not going to do a real one because I'd probably go to the hospital. But I'm thankful for this time. Thanks again. I look forward to talking again in the future. Folks, that's all the time we have for today. So this is Darren Hood, the host of the World of UX podcast, wishing everybody all the best. And until next time, happy UXing, everybody.